Hi friends, it's Beck the Feminist Lawyer again, and we're going to talk about some boundaries. Now, I'm actually not in legal practice right now. I own a conflict management consulting firm. What I do is I work with either private clients or I go to, interest groups, etc., and teach people how to talk through really tough conflict situations. And part of that conversation is setting boundaries. Now, as a millennial, I understand that a lot of us millennials, Gen X's, even Gen Zers are starting to have a real bump up against the boomers of the world. Rampant estrangement, lots of people putting their foot down about a lot of business. Fox News and their ilk with their angertainment have gotten their claws into a lot of the boomer generation, and they're buying into a lot of this hate-based rhetoric, and they're bringing it around us, the people who know better, and we're having a hard time taking it. And it's our responsibilities to put our collective foot down about these things. Abide no hatred, as my shirt says. This is the bitter Southerner, by the way. And it is our responsibility to bring those issues to the dinner table, to make the dinner conversation uncomfortable when bigotry rears its head. We have to make sure that we are on the front lines of these very important fights against racism, misogyny, homophobia, all of these other forms of bigotry. We have to make sure that we are the front lines for this, the people who have access to the folks who are perpetrating these issues. For example, I'm a white person. I am able to get into conversations with racists in ways that people of color cannot. Nobody that's racist is going to listen to the voice of a person of color, but they might listen to me. And white dudes, I'm looking at y'all. You need to start handling your boys and your dads and your uncles and your grandpas and your pick-me misogynist mothers, aunts, and grandmothers. So fighting the good fight is all well and good, but we can't do that when we're completely out of energy, and we should not be exposing ourselves to abuse. So it's very important for us to be able to set boundaries. Now, there's an exercise that I teach my clients called the Yale Language Plus Boundaries. That's what I called it. Using some language that they studied at Yale that is meant to be the least triggering of an adrenal response in the person that you're talking to. It's when you blank, I feel blank. So when you speak about religion in my presence, it makes me feel uncomfortable as a person who is not religious. And then you have to follow that up with the boundary. In the future, I need you to refrain from pushing a religious conversation on me so that I can feel comfortable in your presence. And then you have to set a consequence. If you cannot do this, I must remove myself from any conversation that moves in a religious direction. So let's rephrase that. When you push a religious agenda on me, it makes me feel uncomfortable. In the future, I need you to refrain from bringing up religious contexts and conversations with me so that I can feel comfortable in your presence. If you cannot do this, I must remove myself from any conversation that goes in a religious direction. So you have said how you feel, you have stated your boundary, and you have stated the consequence to your boundary. And now here's where it gets really tricky. You have to hold the boundary. You cannot drop it once. And there's a reason for that. The reason is the scientific principle of intermittent reinforcement. Go Google it. It's amazing. They did a test on rats with treats, and they gave the treats to the rats either at a steady rate or at an intermittent rate. And the rats that got treats at a steady rate had them cut off and stayed cut off, and then they lost interest in pushing the pedal to get the treats. Those who pushed the pedal and occasionally got a treat here or there, they would push the pedal upwards of 100 times to try to get a treat. Whereas the other folks, the other rats, had just completely given up on getting a treat altogether, and they'd moved on with their lives. So what the principle showed is that if you set a boundary, like push the pedal and don't get a treat, if you let up even once, you'll get a treat this time if you push the pedal, you are effectively encouraging the behavior that you have tried to discourage. So now let's put this in a real world context. When you push a religious agenda in conversation with me, it makes me feel uncomfortable. In the future, I need you to refrain from speaking about religious issues in my presence so I can feel comfortable speaking with you. If you cannot do this, I must remove myself from any conversation that goes in a religious direction, okay? In that context. So you're sitting there at the dinner table, and next thing you know, you've said this to grandma, and next thing you know, she starts telling you that your life is miserable because you don't have enough Jesus in it. What do you need to do? You need to get up and leave the table. You need to remove yourself from the conversation. You don't roll your eyes and go, oh, I'm just going to sit here at the table and pretend I'm not listening. No, no, no. You said you were going to remove yourself from any conversation that went into a religious direction, and you need to be prepared to do it and do it every single time. Because if she knows she pushes past your boundary and you cave, then your boundary means nothing. And she thinks she's getting somewhere with you. So she's going to push more Jesus on you. She's going to push more religious rhetoric on you because she thinks she's wearing you down. But after a while, if every time she brings up religious shit, you get up and leave the table, she's going to figure out that if she brings up religious shit, you're going to get up and leave the table, and that it's a non-starter for you, that she's not going to be able to have a conversation about this with you because you will get up and leave every time. And eventually, a sane person is going to give up doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If they bring it up on the phone, hang up the phone. If they bring it up at the table, leave the table. If they bring it up in the car, put your headphones on and ignore them. You leave the conversation every time. Do not drop your boundary once, because you might as well be saying, please try to convert me more times if you do that. The message that you are sending is, if you push on my boundaries hard enough, I will cave. Push harder and I will cave. You are encouraging the behavior that you were trying to discourage. State your boundaries clearly, state a consequence clearly, and do not let up even once. It's the only way you're going to change the behavior of the people around you. Stay safe out there, friends. Keep fighting the good fight.